If you are working with cameras in the outdoor or action sports space, one of the greatest challenges can be taking these people and these athletes who are really fast moving and turning what they're doing into these buttery, really nice, smooth shots. And I'll preface this by saying you don't always want to do that. Part of action sports is the action, right? There should be time. People are moving really fast and they're flying by and you're getting that like adrenaline conveyed. But there are some moments where you just really need to slow things down and exemplify the beauty of what's happening. One of my favorite examples of this is the classic big waterfall shot. Boaters working with the water to just become one with a waterfall in this moment of just total freedom. And I've shot a ton of waterfalls over the past few years, and I've really dialed in my process and my kit. So I'm gonna walk you through what I use, how I use it. That's what we're doing. We're gonna do that. Now, gear is a somewhat important part of this, but there's one really big thing. It's a mistake that I made that was huge when I first started out, and that was framing. I really wanted to be in super tight on the subjects, right? I wanted to really feel intimate, right? Which is cool in waterfalls, right? Because most of the time you're like really far away, you see these people, they're dropping, you can't really tell what's going on. The problem is they're moving really fast, like really fast, really fast. And I learned really quickly that if you're in super tight, you're gonna miss a lot of shots. People are just gonna fly right out of the frame, and then you have nothing to work with, and you've gone to this place and you've set up all this gear and you've done all this work and you get nothing. So you're gonna wanna be a little wider than you might initially think. Now, how wide do you wanna be? Try to shoot in a way that the kayaker and the kayak are not filling the entire frame top to bottom, right? You don't wanna have the stern of the boat right at the top of your frame and the bow right at the bottom. So then if you get just a little bit off with your follow, then the boat's just gonna be moving a little bit in and out of frame. It's gonna look weird. You really wanna have some space on either end of the boat. If you're shooting on a camera that can do 4K, that's great. It gives you the ability to crop later. So I would shoot a little wider even to give yourself a little more margin for error. And then if you wanna tighten it up in post, it's really easy to do, just crop. There is certainly a space for a very wide shot that just encompasses the whole waterfall, and you can see the kayaker in genuine scope, right? To genuine scale, to say like, oh, this waterfall's 100 feet and this kayaker is, you know, a 6 foot tall person in a 9 foot boat, and they're just teeny on this big thing. And I'll often just lock off a second camera on a tripod. Obviously that's not an option for a lot of people, but even if you just set a phone over in a tree or up against a rock, I used to do that before I had 2 cameras, you'd be amazed what you can get. So onto the gear part, of course, as I already mentioned, lenses are a big part of this. Huge fan of the 24-105, 70-200s, 70-300s can be good so long as you're in a place where you can get far enough away from the waterfall to get that framing we talked about. I started taking my 24-105 because I went to a waterfall with my 70-300 and the only places to shoot from were actually pretty close. And so I ended up just, again, in way too tight. So I really recommend, if you can, having 2 lenses with you, one that gives you a slightly wider option and then, you know, a telephoto zoom as well. Big bonus if those lenses have stabilization. We'll get to why in a minute. For your camera, the camera you have is the best camera to shoot with. I'm always gonna say that because I don't think that you need to buy a new camera to learn stuff. I think learn with what you have, and then if you feel like you've really reached the pinnacle of what your camera can do, then maybe it's time to move on to a new camera. But for now, stick with what you've got, give these things a try. Things that are nice to have, like I mentioned, great to have 4K if you can, just to have that ability to crop, right? Give you a little more forgiveness shooting wider and cropping later. And ideally a camera with built-in stabilization, which is pretty much every camera these days. So if you've got one of those, that's great. The last piece of equipment might actually be the most important, and this was a big breakthrough that I've had in the last couple years in filming waterfalls, and that is a tripod. You're probably thinking, ew, tripod, lame. Your camera sits on one in the studio, kind of like this one's doing right now, or this one that I'm talking to. Super boring, more gear to carry, what? And I agreed with that for a long time. And for the first few years that I was filming kayaking, I was shooting waterfalls handheld, and it was just a total gamble. I had a camera with stabilization and I had lenses with stabilization, and I would just go out and I'd just be like, whee, and follow people down the waterfall. And again, I was shooting tight and I was shooting handheld, so it was just a real gamble. and now I'm shooting 100%. Like every time somebody runs a waterfall, the shot comes out good because I have this process figured out. And a big part of that process is having a fluid head tripod. If you're not familiar with what a fluid head is, you've got tripods like you're thinking of. You put them on a stand and the camera sits there and that's it, and you're done. A fluid head is a much larger head that has adjustments that allow you to basically control this fluid movement in the head of the tripod, which I'm sure you can see how that would be important on a waterfall, because then instead of having this jerky motion when you're following, you can set your tripod to run really smoothly with you. So how do I do that? Well, I like to get up to a waterfall, make sure I'm there plenty early before the kayakers are gonna go off the drop. And then I basically will adjust the tension on my fluid head to be moving the same speed that the water is, because that's roughly the speed that the kayaker is gonna be going to. You can be a lot more accurate if you do a bunch of those practice shots and really dial in that speed. I cannot mention a fluid head tripod without pointing out that they are not all the same. My first fluid head tripod I bought in 2023. It's called a Caver. I got it off of Amazon. It's carbon fiber, which the legs are, but you know, there's a lot of plastic. It's really heavy. It's not super well built. It was around 185 bucks when I bought it, which is really cheap for a fluid head setup. And I pretty immediately realized that there were little jerks that I could see in my videos. You know, when I was filming waterfalls, I'd see these little just hiccups in the shot. And then I borrowed a friend's tripod that was also a fluid head that was much nicer, and used it, and there were no hiccups. Everything was perfectly smooth. I was like, it's the tripod. So that goes to say, I don't recommend this one. I think it had really good reviews on Amazon, which is why I bought it, and I've kept it just to use as a studio tripod, but don't buy this. It's not good. Shortly after that, my buddy Todd was selling this tripod on Marketplace. For whatever reason, I got super lucky and he decided to just give it to me. So thank you, Todd. I've been using it ever since. This tripod is by a company called Benro. This is the S4 fluid head. They have many different fluid heads. This one, the head only is 160 bucks. The tripod itself is about 140, so it's roughly a $300 package. And I have been so happy with it. It is kind of heavy because it's all aluminum, but I think it's worth it. It's just been a great performing tripod. I've been super happy with it. So I highly recommend these. If you have the funds and you want something really nice, last year I got to shoot on a Satchler. They, you know, range anywhere from 500 well into the thousands of dollars. And I mean, they are really nice. I haven't found that I needed something quite that nice yet. Maybe someday, but I've been super happy with this Benro. It's really treated me well. So, you know, while we're talking about this, I'm gonna really quickly kind of demonstrate how this works, because I realize talking about what a fluid head is nice, but if you can't see how it works, it probably doesn't make too much sense. So that should be in focus. So most important thing, we've got this little dial right here, and that's what controls our tension in the fluid head. And you know, a nicer fluid head is gonna be much more sensitive when you're doing this. And this one has a nice range of sensitivity. The cheap Amazon one that I got over here, it's just like you can open it all the way up and it still moves really slowly. So I can barely get it to move fast enough to keep up with somebody on a waterfall. This Benro has a very wide range, like I can let it go super fast. And you can see how smooth that is even, right? Like there's no jumpiness to it, nice, smooth. When I'm shooting on a fluid head tripod, I typically do not have stabilization turned on my lens and on my camera. I don't fully trust stabilization. I still sometimes get weird artifacts, especially when shooting at high frame rates. You know, you get those screen wobbles that are just annoying to fix. And I've not had any issues shooting with stabilization off. And when I shoot with the stabilization turned off, if I apply stabilization in post, that seems to work better than me just shooting with stabilization on in the first place. So if you have a fluid head tripod, I would recommend trying stabilization on and stabilization off. See what you feel better about. I still think it's good to have a camera and a lens with stabilization in case you end up shooting handheld. I mean, if you have a handheld waterfall shot without stabilization on your camera or lens, it's gonna be tough to work with. And that's it, that's my whole process. So go do cool stuff, make cool stuff, and I'll see you out there. Oh, what else am I gonna say here? We got all that stuff, blah, blah, blah. What else am I doing? What was we talking about? Oh, right.